Are you all waiting for me?
We're just about to get started, Commissioner Cardenas.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right, let's go ahead and good morning. Let's go ahead and call our meeting to order. It's November 13th, 2020, and this is our Law and Policy Committee meeting. Ms. Linker, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Cardenas?
Here.
Chair Matich?
Here. All right, we'll proceed to item number 1, public comment for items not on the agenda. Do you have any public comment either on the phone or digitally for items not on our agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we'll proceed to item number 2, approval of our October 7th, 2020 meeting minutes. Commissioner Cardenas, did you have any edits or comments on our October 7th committee meeting minutes?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
All right, excellent. Is there any public comment on item number 2? Hearing and seeing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll move it.
And I will second. Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Cardenas?
Yes.
Chair Matich?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Moving on to item number 3. This is our discussion item for commissioner compensation policy. We have General Counsel Dave Bainbridge here to present on this item, and this is, as a reminder, Commissioner Cardenas, this is something that you raised at our last meeting for consideration here at the committee and then for subsequent recommendation to the full commission. So do you wish to, Commissioner Cardenas, say anything before we turn it over to Mr. Bainbridge to brief us?
I could. I don't need to. If it would be helpful to Mr. Bainbridge for me to frame it since I asked for it, or either way.
Yes. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and take a moment and just sort of tee up the issue as you see it?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ever since I cast the vote 2 years ago or so, along with my colleagues at the time on the board, as I recall, it was a unanimous vote to institute a new compensation. I'm getting some feedback. Do I really sound that way?
You sound clear on our end, Commissioner Cardenas.
It's not often I hear my own voice. That's rather disconcerting. I apologize.
You have a great voice. Come on now.
And in this corner. And so, Mr. Chair, you're not old enough to remember, but down goes Frazier. In any event, I think the record will reflect that I said at the time that we took the vote to adopt the new compensation policy for commissioners that it was a mistake. And then I went and I voted for it anyways, if I recall. And my term ends in a couple of months, and that is the one vote that I truly regret. And my personal feelings aside, just objectively in terms of good governance, I don't believe it's appropriate for anybody, and we have laws in this state that stand for this proposition that our commission is sworn to enforce, right? I don't believe it is ethical for anybody to take a vote that has financial implications for the members of the body, and yet we did. And I don't think that should happen again. And so I'm not suggesting that the commissioners of the FPPC should not be compensated or that we should go to the old compensation system. What I am suggesting is that whether there should be compensation, and if so, what it should be, and whether it should be adjusted from time to time with a cost of living or whatever, that ought not to be done or approved, neither designed nor approved by sitting members of the commission whose income, maybe de minimis, but still whose income is going to be affected by the decision. Uh, I regret that I was a part of a vote that is not consistent with some of the core laws that we are sworn to enforce and hold others to. And so whether it's some kind of advisory body of maybe former commissioners and and ethics leaders across the state that studies it and reports back to the next iteration of our commission. But I think it there needs to be a determination of whether or not of what the compensation, if any, should be for the board, and it needs to be done by someone other than any constitution of the FPPC commission. That's my thinking, Mr. Bainbridge.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardenas. I appreciate your comments. Mr. Bainbridge?
Sure, and thank you. That's helpful, Commissioner Cardenas. I'll give a quick overview of the commissioner compensation, just so we're kind of all starting at the same point. Commissioner compensation is governed by Government Code 83106, which says that commissioners are compensated at the rate of $100 for each day on which the commissioner engages in official duties. So back in the 70s, the commission obtained an attorney general opinion as to exactly what that meant, what restrictions there were, what sort of room the commission had to make its own policy. And what the attorney general opinion said at the time was that statute entitled a commissioner to $100 for each meeting day and nothing more. The opinion went on to say the commission could adopt its own policy identifying what official duties constituted, and then if a policy was adopted, commissioners could be compensated for official duties. It also said that the rate of $100 per day could be prorated by hour. So those are the basic restrictions and constructs in which a policy would need to be adopted. And the point of that opinion, the underlying point, was that the commission has an obligation to protect the public fisc. So in adopting a policy that allowed for either hourly compensation or daily compensation beyond just meeting days, the commission should keep that in mind. The current policy, which was adopted back in February of 2018 with a minor change in June of 2018, provides for $100 for commission and committee meeting days, and then an hourly rate of $12.50 an hour for official duties, which is defined in the policy. Essentially, what official duties is defined as is preparing for any committee or commission meeting. And then any amount of hours over 40 hours a month would need to be approved by the commission. That's another finding out of that attorney general opinion was that you couldn't cap the number of hours that once you allowed for an hourly rate, you couldn't cap the number of hours that an official spent, but you could have procedures in place to ensure that the hours were being spent in a way that was within the official duties of the commissioner. So that is the current policy, been in effect since February of 2018. It's very similar to the policy that was adopted after the Bennett Attorney General opinion back in '77, which was eventually rescinded sometime in the '80s. Before we had the current policy, the policy was that commissioners were paid $100 for every meeting day and then an additional $100 as a prep day for each meeting. That was before there were any committee meetings, so it was really $200 a month for commissioners. So that's where we stand right now with the policy. In terms of options, one option would be just to rescind the current policy. We would then default to the statute, which the Attorney General's office has interpreted to say you get $100 for meeting days. So that would be commission meeting days and presumably committee meeting days as well. Another option would be for the commission to rescind the policy and adopt a new policy of its own. Under the Political Reform Act, adopting a compensation policy of this sort is not technically a conflict of interest. There's obviously an argument that it's not in the spirit of the law, even if it's not technically a conflict for the commissioners to adopt a policy that applies to them. So that's another option, would be the commission itself adopting a new policy. The other policy, which Commissioner Cardenas, or the other possibility that Commissioner Cardenas alluded to, would be the commission could rescind the current policy and then delegate the authority to adopt a new policy to one or more people, basically anyone that's not one of the 4 commissioners who this applies to in the entire world. So that could be former commissioners, it could be staff, it could be whoever the commission felt it was appropriate to delegate that authority to. And with that, that's all I have to. Those are all the suggestions I could come up with, but happy to answer any questions.
So I have a clarifying question, Mr. Bainbridge. So prior to the 2018 adoption of what is our current policy, I think you mentioned that the commission's policy at that time was $100 for attending the commission meeting and $100 to prep for the meeting. Was there any additional flexibility under that pre-2018 policy?
At one point, there was authorization from the chair the chair could authorize additional time if need be, but you couldn't go beyond a day of preparation unless prior approval from the chair. I don't know exactly when that became the rule and how long it was in effect, but that was one of the provisions at one time.
All right. And then I know recently we've received some communication from, I think it was the Department of Finance here in the state, that all state agencies are being asked to reduce their operating expenditures by at least 5% if possible, given financial difficulties in our state. Do we have any history of prior occasions, because it seems to me we've had budgetary issues in our state before, other times where commissioners have, in light of those budgetary difficulties, changed or modified our commissioner compensation or reimbursement policies?
I'll go ahead and let Larissa Hahn answer this question. I think she's more familiar with this.
Ms. Hahn.
Good morning, Commissioner and Chairs. There was a time back at 2012, there were some budget reductions, and at that time, the prior chair, Chair Ravel, did set up a policy with the administration division to go and limit the reimbursement to no more than $200 a month. Regardless of the amount or the days of the commissioner that contributed working on the commission assignments or the meetings.
Thank you. Commissioner Cardenas, do you have comments, thoughts?
Mr. Bainbridge, Ms. Hahn, thank you very much. That's very helpful. My current thinking, Mr. Chair, is that there should be established an advisory body to focus on this particular question and to make a recommendation to the one member of the board of the commission who has and would have no pecuniary interest in any decision, and that is the chair. And then the chair would make the decision on whether the existing policy would be changed and whether it would be changed consistent with the recommendation of such a task force or otherwise. I'm just throwing that out, but that strikes me as perhaps a prudent way to go.
Did you have thoughts on who we might tap to constitute that body that would make the recommendation to the chair? Were you thinking that would be, our executive director, and perhaps Ms. Hahn as Chief of Administration, Mr. Bainbridge, were you thinking, what were you thinking in that sense?
Perhaps a former commissioner, an ethics professor, or someone in the area of good government, and a staff member. So I would think a senior staff person, a former commissioner, and someone whose trade is thinking about matters ethical. I'm just throwing that out.
All right. Mr. Bainbridge, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Is there any, I mean, that sounds good to me, but are there any limitations on us inviting prior commissioners back to advise the commission or getting outside experts to help us on such things?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. I agree with Commissioner Cardenas. I think it's not a good look at a minimum, and I think I also have concerns that it does violate the spirit of the laws to have commissioners setting their own compensation policies. I think there's a balance to be had here, though, between ensuring that commissioners do receive the compensation that they're entitled to under the statute. That's clear enough, and I think perhaps some time to encourage them to spend some efforts preparing for the meetings is appropriate. How far we go beyond that, I think, is something I'm interested in hearing from the panel that Commissioner Cardenas has recommended. So, Commissioner Cardenas, if I'm hearing you, we would have staff come back to us with a proposal to constitute the action would be, we would be recommending rescinding the current policy as a commission-initiated policy. The second piece would be to impanel a group consisting of one staff member, yet to be determined, and two outside individuals, one of whom would be a former commissioner, the other would be an expert in state and local ethics laws. Those folks would come together and make a recommendation for a compensation policy that would apply to the non-full-time commissioners in our body, and that would be presented for approval, and that's, I guess this is the question, it would be presented for approval or rejection to the chair, or just it's presented to the chair and the chair just essentially goes along with how does that interaction play out now that I'm talking about it out loud?
Perhaps the task force, I'll just use that term, will make its recommendation to the chair, and the chair and her or his determination will decide, and that decision may be but need not be consistent with the recommendation of the advisory body. I mean, presumably it would be the recommendation would carry some heft and gravitas, but yeah, the chair from the day that the people voted for the Political Reform Act, the chair is the only full-time salaried position. It was structured such that the chair is different, and it doesn't seem to me that making this determination is or should be outside of the purview of the chair. I think having some advice such as we're talking about would be helpful. Also, Mr. Chair, I don't know that I am committed to a rescission of the existing policy. I don't know that I would want to have this commission change the policy that we've had for the last 2.5 years, just as the composition of the commission is about to change. I just don't know. I'm open to your help with that.
Well, I mean, Mr. Bainbridge, I think you're going to have to help us navigate this one. I think the challenge I see, Commissioner Cardenas, is the policy is now fixed by action of the full commission. And if we wanted to create the structure that you're proposing, it would no longer be a fixed policy by the commission. Instead, it would be a task force and the chair making the decision of what the policy is. I actually agree with you. The task force and the chair may come to the conclusion through that process that our current policy is the right one to continue. The only difference would be then that group could then modify that policy going forward without commission input. But I do think we have to modify the existing policy in some way to allow that to be the process to change it going forward. Is that right, Mr. Bainbridge, or is there some way to both keep that in place and create the new structure all at the same time?
I think what you could do is leave the current policy in place pending adoption of a new policy based on the structure you've described. So the current policy would remain until a new policy was decided upon. And if the new policy that's decided upon is the same as the old policy, then there's really no functional difference. But then at least you're operating under an existing policy in the meantime.
If the task force comes to a different policy conclusion, though, don't you at some point then have to rescind the policy that's on the books by formal commission action?
Yeah, I think my recommendation would be when you make the motion to create the group to study this, you would be clear that upon final approval by the chair of what has been introduced or whatever the new policy is, that act would then rescind the existing policy.
Okay.
So it's just in the wording of the motion.
Okay. All right.
So in a sense, Mr. Chair, if I understand what Mr. Bainbridge is suggesting or postulating, it would be the board subsequent to this committee's vote, the commission voting to delegate to the chair the decision on whether the compensation policy is going to be changed, with the proviso that the chair's decision will take into account such a task force's recommendation.
That's how I understand it. The only modification I think I would make to that, based on what you just said, is that I think, first of all, I think that the staff person, or the most logical staff person from our agency to be involved in this would be the executive director. And I think we should delegate clearly to the executive director in her sole discretion which of the former commissioners and which state and local ethics expert were part of the panel. I don't think we want to permit a chair to essentially create the panel that the chair is supposed to be then taking the input from in making this decision. So I think we need to allow the executive director to do that on her own without interference from the chair.
I completely agree. Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Bainbridge, is that sufficient direction for you and your staff to work something up for us to then present to the commission consistent with what we're talking about here today?
Yeah, I assume it'll basically be a motion for what you've described, right? Authorizing or delegating this authority to the chair based on the structure that's been described?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, we can put that together.
Okay. What's a reasonable time frame? Is this something that we can get done by December?
Well, I think
I'm cognizant of Commissioner Cardenas' point that he is on the back end of his term, and I think he has I'm hearing a strong desire to get this wrapped up before his term ends.
Yeah, I don't think it's noticed for the December meeting, correct? So it would have to be January. I'm sorry, I'm a month ahead.
You are?
Yes.
You threw me there. We haven't even done the November meeting.
Yeah, yes, I think December's definitely doable.
Okay.
All right, everyone's awake. I was checking.
Yes, there you go. Commissioner Cardenas, does that sound okay to you? We'd present this to our colleagues at the December meeting.
Yes, yes, thank you very much.
All right. So Mr. Bainbridge, perhaps what we can do is you and your staff can put together the proposal for us. We can hear this again in law and policy next month in December to make sure it meets what we talked about here today with an eye towards presenting it to the full commission at the December commission meeting then. Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Commissioner Cardenas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much.
All right. Moving on to item number 4. This is the legislative update. We have our legislative counsel, Ms. Nakano, with us. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, last month, Senior Commission Counsel Karen Harrison presented on the behested payment reporting process and on potential legislative changes to that process. The committee approved a motion to recommend to the full commission that those legislative changes be added to the commission's legislative agenda, and I will be communicating that recommendation to the commission next week. Today, I'm presenting to the committee draft language that I've prepared in consultation with Ms. Harrison that reflects the legislative changes approved by the committee. First, for context, I'll briefly recap the current process and requirements. Elected officers and members of the Public Utilities Commission are required to file behested payment reports with their respective agencies. That reporting duty is triggered when payments made at the behest of that officer or member reach an aggregate amount of $5,000 from a single source in the same calendar year, and the report must be filed with the agency within 30 days of reaching that $5,000 threshold. After the initial report is filed, subsequent reports must be filed for every additional behested payment made by the same source in the same calendar year within 30 days of each payment. Note that reporting is not required for all behested payments as that term is defined in the Act, but only for those that meet certain conditions listed in Section 84224, including that the payment is made principally for legislative, governmental, or charitable purpose. Next, the agency has a duty to forward a copy of that report. For elected state officers and PUC members, the report goes to the Fppc. For local officers, the copy goes to the local filing officer, and that forwarding must occur within 30 days of receiving the report. For agencies that submit a copy of the report to the Fppc, they currently have 3 options for submission. They can use the electronic filing system on the Fppc website, they can send a hard copy, or they can email a copy. Hard copies and emailed copies must be manually input into the electronic system by Fppc staff. This is a time-intensive process, and though staff is careful because this is done manually, errors are possible. On the other hand, for e-filed reports, the public data from the reports is automatically populated into the public-facing database and does not require further processing by staff. A legislative change to require e-filing for elected state officers and PUC members would have additional benefits. First, electronic filing is convenient and easy to use. E-filed reports are automatically assigned a tracking number, which provides assurance to the filer that the report was received. And the tracking number also makes it easier to make amendments to the report if they're needed later. Second, as I previously mentioned, e-filed reports require less commission staff time for processing. Additionally, by requiring officers to file directly with the commission, this reduces the workload of state agencies, which are currently responsible for accepting the original filing and forwarding a copy to the commission. Third, mandatory e-filing results in faster public access. Because the e-filed reports are automatically populated into the public database, reports filed timely by state officers and PUC members would be publicly viewable within about 30 days of the behested payments reaching the threshold. Under the system in current law, this can take more than 60 days, 30 days for the original filing, another 30 for forwarding the report, and any additional time for processing by commission staff. Included in my written update today is proposed draft language. The draft makes two main substantive changes. First, for elected state officers and PUC members, the draft would require e-filing directly with the FPPC instead of first with the agency, within 30 days of reaching the behested payment threshold. And second, for all other elected officers, including regional, county, municipal, district, and judicial officers, the draft would require the officer to file directly with their filing officer instead of first with their agency. The draft would also authorize the use of electronic filing systems for these reports and would clarify that electronically filed reports are original reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nakano. I have one question for you. This certainly seems like a very sensible legislative change, create some efficiencies, make it more modern. I like all aspects of that. My question for you is, have we had discussions with Ethics Council in the two houses of the legislature to gauge their thoughts on this type of a proposed statutory change?
I believe the Assembly, they're already on board with electronic filing. I think they mostly do electronic filing. The Senate kind of goes multiple ways. I think Mr. Bainbridge has a comment.
Yeah, I've had general discussions with the Senate Ethics. Just kind of do you see any big problems here? Do you think this is something that the Senate would be a non-starter? And the indication was that they'd be open to the, without saying or speaking on anyone's behalf, that they thought they'd be open to this sort of change in the law. Okay,
all right. That's and you know, obviously, I'm not asking for for them to speak on behalf of their members. More, my question was directed more at, you know, have they thought about this? Do they agree with our assessment that this would make it more efficient, more user-friendly from their perspective? I know they spend a lot of time helping members file these types of reports, and so it was more, do they agree with our assessment? This is a worthwhile endeavor legislatively, and it sounds like they certainly are open to it at a minimum. Commissioner Cardenas, thoughts, questions?
Ms. Nakano, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Terrific presentation. I'd be interested in any comments, insights from Ms. Harrison.
Ms. Harrison.
Well, I think that this is my turn to now talk about some of the additional concepts for consideration before the committee. We have identified at the beginning of this process before the committee, back before Commissioner Cardenas was on board, we identified a number of areas that we thought could be clarified and clarified in different ways, fact sheets, updating the form, possible regulation and legislation. And so staff wanted to point out for the committee that there are 4 additional areas that could be considered to be added to a legislative proposal. And those 4 areas are set out in the memo that's with the agenda. But briefly, the first one is to possibly have a threshold amount for subsequent reporting after the $5,000 threshold. The second would be to authorize filers to use an estimated amount when the correct amount isn't readily available to them in order to promote timely filing as opposed to not filing. And then they would follow up with the correct amount when that became available to them. The third is to clarify the record-keeping duties for filers. And the fourth is to require additional disclosure when there's a relationship between the behesting officer and the recipient of the behest. And that would go towards the issue of personal benefit that's been of great concern for the committee. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. As far as the e-filing language that's proposed, I'm happy to answer further questions on that as well.
Commissioner Cardenas, did you have any additional questions for Ms. Harrison?
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair. I think this is a terrific direction. Well done.
All right, I agree. So at this time, what I would like us to do, Commissioner Cardenas, is approve the draft language that Ms. Nakano has presented to us on the change we had discussed last month, which is simply to afford the opportunity and require at the state level electronic filing of behested payment reports and afford that opportunity at the local level. And then the full commission can discuss and deliberate on whether, as part of the legislative process, we want to pursue the additional 4 areas that Ms. Harrison just mentioned to us. Does that sound good to you, Commissioner Cardenas?
It sounds so good. That is my motion.
Excellent. Well, then I'm seconding your motion, Commissioner Cardenas.
As well you should.
Yes. Ms. Laker, why don't we make it official and call the roll?
Commissioner Cardenas?
Yes.
Chair Matich?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Excellent. Great work, Ms. Harrison. Great work, Ms. Nakano, and also Mr. Bainbridge. Thank you. I know you had a hand in this behind the scenes as well, so thank you. All right, that brings us to, well, I should say, Ms. Nakano, do you have anything else on legislation for us? I know we just spent time talking about behested payments, but any other updates for us on the other legislative proposals that we have outstanding?
We're still working on developing language, and we're reaching out more to potential authors and starting to get some responses.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 5 then. This is where we identify the items we're going to have on the December 2020 Law and Policy Committee meeting. I know we just asked Mr. Bainbridge to bring back the commissioner compensation policy options that we just discussed. So I think that is one item certainly that will be on the agenda for next month. I think Ms. Nakano has a standing item to do our legislative update, so I'd anticipate that is coming back to us in December again. I know we have streamline regulation updates that Ms. West and soon to be Ms. Brereton will be presenting to us in December, and so my expectation is that those will come back to Law and Policy in December for discussion and recommendation prior to the full commission meeting in December. So that's 3 items. Commissioner Cardenas, did you have anything else that you wish to come up in December at Law and Policy?
No, I do not, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, then I think those are the items we'll go ahead and roll with for December. Commissioner Cardenas, did you have any other thoughts or comments for our committee before we adjourn today?
No, Mr. Chair, just our undying thanks and admiration to our entire staff during this election season. Based on the numbers that Ms. West provided the other day and what we've otherwise seen and has been reported, quite a robust season for better and worse in the areas in which our commission has jurisdiction, and by all accounts a terrific, as usual, job being done by our staff.
I agree. I wholeheartedly join in those comments, Commissioner Cardenas. Thank you. Thank you for that. So at this time, do we have a motion to adjourn, Commissioner Cardenas?
Wishing everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving, I move to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
All right. That's second. Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Cardenas?
Yes.
Chair Matich?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week at the commission meeting.
Stay safe, everybody.
All right. You too.